Okay, so one of the biggest mysteries on planet Earth was and continues to be the pyramids. We look around the world, we find pyramids all over the world, and there's so many different stories and different things that pertain to these pyramids, who built them, why they was built, and their actual function and purpose, if it is one. But we got to look at this and just ask ourselves the why as far as the purpose of the pyramids. So now, the thing is, and I'll give you an analogy. I mean, just think about it. If you find yourself middle of nowhere, you have absolutely no idea where you are, how you got there, or where you're going. But eventually, you find other people, you create a civilization. What you're going to do, and your first instinct during this moment, is going to be self-preservation, of course, but also it's going to be as a civilization to survive, to basically figure things out, and to basically grow as a civilization, and to basically survive. And you can only survive with the resources that you have. So it doesn't make sense for any civilization with supposed intelligence, that has sophistication and intelligence, to build pyramids for no reason. It's a huge undertaking when you look at these pyramids and when you see them, as of course you guys have. They are huge. The time and resources it takes to build such things, why would you do it for symbolic reasons? It doesn't make sense. It's the same thing with the temples, just as with the pyramids. They're huge. There are so many of them, and it doesn't make sense to build this stuff just because you believe in something that's not real, that doesn't exist. So we got to think about that. You got to think about that analogy as a people, as a civilization. What are you going to do with your time and resources? And as we can see, looking back at the ancient world, they spent their days, they spent their lives dealing with the building of these pyramids, temples, everything that we ascribe to so-called religion, but it goes back to nature, the planets, so on and so forth. So all over the world, we find these pyramids, we find these temples, and what we tend to do today is we associate churches today to what we see back during ancient times. So you look at churches today, and people go to church and they pray to this book and they pray to this God. Nothing happens, as we all know. Millions of dollars are spent building these mega churches. We've seen these mega churches. We've seen these ancient churches that are elaborate. They are beautiful. They are ornate in a lot of different places, and it's so much detail and craftsmanship and masonry that goes into the building of these structures. It's like, we know that it's bullshit. Why would you build this church? Why would you spend all this time and money building these churches when we know nothing happens? So mega churches is built, nothing happens. So we look at this and we equate this to back during ancient times, and we think the same thing with the ancient civilizations, that they just built this stuff for symbolic reasons because they believed in something that's just as weird and spooky as us believing in Jesus and Moses and all this other stuff. And it's the same back then as it is now, to where, yeah, we spend all this money because people believe, and that sort of justifies the time and effort and money and everything else that goes into building these structures, because a lot of people believe it's real. But it doesn't make sense for a civilization back then that's intelligent, that's united, and that's advanced to do so unless it had some real benefit. So as we begin to dig deeper into these ancient civilizations and the monuments and the temples and everything that they built, we see that it's clearly not symbolic, that these things correspond to planets, they correspond to astrology and astrological zodiacal signs that actually exist, nature, the human body, plants, animals, so on and so forth. These monoliths and temples and statues and pyramids go back to very real things that actually exist. And we know sun moon worship exists, still does. We know that the ancient civilizations revered the sun and the moon, and that a lot of the mythology that surround them is dealing with the sun and the moon. And again, you look at that and you still say, okay, well, it's the sun and the moon. We know they really exist. Why go through the trouble of building these huge, temples and structures to the sun and moon if it wasn't a purpose or a point to it? So I talk about the movie Prometheus in a few videos, and in that movie, what they basically do, this is a really important movie, by the way. If you didn't see Prometheus, you need to see it. But it's an important movie because they took, real artifacts, like real ancient carvings, mixed with some fictional carvings in a fictional location in outer space near Saturn, to basically come to the conclusion that we should all have come to by now, and that many people don't even know, is even a question or a thing. And that's the fact that when we look around the world, we find all these reliefs and carvings, different civilizations drawing the exact same thing and talking about the exact same constellation, which we're going to get into a lot in this video, one specific. But across the world, we find this unity with the constellations and the same drawing of these constellations by different civilizations over different periods of time. So now in the movie, we know they took those carvings and they basically did a compilation and they compiled them and they put together a map that basically sent them to this planet where they was hoping to find the aliens that created human life. Because what they came to the conclusion and proved in the movie was, in fact, it was aliens that created, the human race, and we shared DNA with them. And as I talk about in my videos, the whole junk DNA or the missing link, the reason why it's missing, the reason why they call it junk DNA, is because that DNA can't be found on this planet. That part that's coded within us can't be found because it comes from whatever or whoever created us, and so on and so forth. I get into this, but Prometheus in the movie, they get right into it and they go into those aspects and they ask those questions. And the thing is, it's a movie, but it's the exact same thing in real life. In real life, we have these reliefs, we have these carvings, as I'm going to show you in this video, from different civilizations around the world, different people during different time periods, talked about the same thing. They drew the same thing and they revered the same things all across the world. And it's just like in a movie, to where when you start to compile this information and look at it, there is no way you can do that. You can look at it and come to the conclusion that this is strictly symbolic for no reason at all. And they just did this, out of the blue to celebrate or basically pay homage or praise these, constellations and so on and so forth. So this is something you got to ask yourself. And this is where the research is going to lead you to when you start doing the research. And the deeper you dig, you're going to see how crazy it gets and how this question just keep pounding away at you as to the why. So when we look at these pyramids around the world, especially in Egypt, of course, we see with the Great Pyramids, they gave us math, they gave us science, they gave us geometry, astrology, and so on and so forth. And it's the same with the pyramids down in Mexico and Chichen Itza. And when you look at these pyramids, they not only give you all that, they also give you effects that correspond with the sun. Now also here you have the vernal autumn equinox. In the afternoon, the sunlight hits the stairway, causing 7 isosceles triangles to form and create a shadow of what is basically a 120-foot rattlesnake. And that rattlesnake basically is shown like down the side of the railing here on the stairs, and it corresponds or connects to the head that's at the bottom of that railing. This is why that head is there, because it's the head of the snake. And with the illusion, you would say, or the way the shadows hit that stairway, that railing, it gives you this whole rattlesnake along with the pyramid or the triangle pattern that looks like a rattlesnake. So it's something that people come to see. It happens twice a year. They're at the temple of Kukulkan, which Kukulkan is the Mayan name for Quetzalcoatl. And Quetzalcoatl is also called the morning star, which is Venus. And I talked about this in the Osiris DVD. And what that entails, but it meant something for the Mayans and Chichen Itza as well. And that's one of the things we're going to get into in this video. Understanding the Mayan culture. We know we had the Olmec, we had the Mayan, we had the Inca, and these different civilizations and how not so unique in their own little customs, but what they talked about as far as what they practice is exactly the same. And we're going to see it in so many different places. And just like also in Egypt, you have the 3 pyramids aligning with the stars on Orion's belt. You also have the pyramids in Mexico aligning with Orion. This is one of the reasons why I went down there in November during this time to basically see Orion, which I've seen a few times in my travels across the world. And it's a beautiful thing to see when you can see Orion and you can see the constellations that they saw thousands of years ago still there. And the fact that they talked about this thousands of years ago is amazing, as if it's something to behold, which it is. So I posted on my Instagram this picture of the entire Orion. As you can see, it's right there. I'm in Mexico at the hotel. Chichen Itza is about a couple hours away. So you have the same alignment. You have the same thing with Orion in Egypt as you do it with the pyramids in Mexico. And as we see this whole pyramid set up here, they also have, interestingly enough, the same type of setup as the temple in Karnak, where it equates to the body. So again, when we look at the pyramids and temples all over the world, we clearly see the same things. And it says here, celestial alignments. As with other ancient cultures, observatories, pyramids, and temples were erected based on celestial alignments. Prior to the Maya rising to power circa 400 AD in Central America and Mexico, there is evidence that the Olmec people had already begun to use astronomical orientations to direct the layout of several ceremonial centers, with the pyramids of the New World oriented to observing and predicting the motions of the sun and moon. As with the Egyptians, we can deduce that Mayan astronomical endeavors heavily relied upon the ritual and ceremonial worlds of the culture. However, here we have a wealth of evidence to substantiate such claims. Left behind are codices, or systems of hieroglyphic recordings of the Maya, and which include celestial sightings and how these sightings and predictions are woven into the entire cultural complex. The Dresden Codex has perhaps proved the most fruitful in helping to recreate the ancient environment and containing an elaborate calendar used to record the observations of Venus, which again, if you've seen the last DVD on Osiris, we get into Venus, and we just talked about Venus with Quetzalcoatl being the morning star, which seems to be an object of utmost importance to them. Working with both a solar calendar and a ritual calendar, the ancient Maya imparted much meaning in the heliacal rising of Venus, which is made evident in the structure of several ceremonial centers throughout the area. Unlike the megalithic and Egyptian complexes, scientific observation can be better deciphered here because of the elaborate recordings left behind and because of the fact that so many of the deductions the Mayan made so closely resemble recent calculations of the same recorded cycles. Like the Egyptians, the Maya had devised 2 calendars, one solar and one ritual, which interacted and depended upon one another for the dictation of certain ritual events to be carried out. The sky for the Maya was a seeming personification of gods and deities who played important roles in the daily lives of the population. Most significantly, the relationship between the sun and Venus was represented of Kutayakan, the god of Venus, and symbolized the cyclic myth of departure and return, or death and resurrection. In addition, other objects may have been tracked in order to predict certain natural phenomena in accordance to seasonal changes, therefore placing major importance on the accurate prediction undertaken to better predict the earthly events thought to be under the control of the gods. So what it's basically saying is exactly what we see in ancient Kemet with this whole relationship with the pyramids and the temples, dealing with agriculture and so on and so forth. It's the same thing we see when you start looking at many of these ancient civilizations and the things that they built is dealing with astrology or dealing with vegetation or growth or the crops and so on and so forth. Talked about with Osiris and the whole Korax festival, and then him laying straight out is basically dealing with, if you've seen the DVD on Osiris, which would basically be before this, but him laying straight out is basically dealing with rebirth. As I said, he's the god of the underworld, because when you're dead, you lay straight out. You're in the coffin, you lay straight out, and it's dealing with the sun's journey through what's under the zodiac. So that circle in that zodiac, as we see in the temple of Dendera, shows you one, they had a knowledge of astrology, they have a knowledge of the zodiac, which is where we all get it from, and it's important and huge and vital in everything that they did in the ancient world. We see the same thing in Mexico. So when you look north, south, east, west, anywhere in Mexico, all over the world, the one constellation that you're going to see constantly that seems to be in the the center of most civilizations in Mesoamerica, Mexico, and North and South America, is the Pleiades. The Pleiades, which is we're gonna talk about a lot in this DVD. The Pleiades is super important, and if you study the Maya, we know they were obsessed with the Pleiades, and just about every ancient civilization around there was obsessed with the Pleiades. So what do we know the Maya for? We know the Maya, of course, for, the calendar, the whole Mayan calendar and everything, which you basically can get, which I have mine right here for like $25 when you go to Chichen Itza. They give you the whole Mayan calendar based off your birth date. And, see my name here, and then they give you the whole constellations and their writing and their number system, which they was really big into numbers, and they give you all this. But the interesting part, if you didn't know before you went there, is it's all dealing with astrology. It's dealing with astrology. So we know they're known for the calendar. We know they're known for basically disappearing, and of course the big one, 2012, which supposed to be, to most people, thought was going to be the end of the world. They even made a movie called 2012, scared the hell out of a lot of people. But 2012 marked something important. And we know the whole Mayan calendar dealing with 2012. We know that they disappeared seemingly. If you go to Chichen Itza, you go to these places down there in Mexico, they'll tell you that the Maya is still there. They speak a different version of Mexican, Spanish, what have you, and that it's supposedly they supposedly are Maya people. And when you take the tour, you go to the little villages there and everything like that, and you can believe what you want to believe. But of course, we know they come from the Olmec, and you have the Olmec, then you have the Maya, then you have the Inca, and remnants or traces of those peoples could have possibly been left behind, but to me it's unlikely, which we'll touch on in this video. But they're known for these things, and what 2012 was about, and some of you guys already know this who study 2012. You have May 20th, 2012, just like you had with the shadows creating the effect with the rattlesnake, with the isosceles triangles basically coming down the side of the steps. You have basically what the Maya call the Day of No Shadows, which would be May 20th, 2012.